It's my great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, educator, naturalist, and my fellow Openlands Board Member, Wendy Paulsen. Wendy has been my friend for over 30 years, and it's because of her mentoring and example of volunteerism that I became keenly interested in conservation and nature, and that I support the work of Openlands. Wendy's lifelong deep love for teaching and connecting people to nature has been the foundation for her ethic for volunteerism and her leadership in local, national, and international conservation organizations. In Illinois, New York City, and Washington, D.C., Wendy has found creative ways to educate and connect youth to nature. In Barrington, Illinois, she began the Nature Lady program in the elementary schools to teach about prairies and native flora and fauna. When she moved out east, she developed programs in urban areas to connect school children to nature through birds. She regularly leads bird walks in the forest preserves as well as on the city front, lakefront for all ages. At Openlands, Wendy helped launch the Birds in My Neighborhood program, which Jerry referred to, a powerful program that is active in close to 40 CPS schools. In addition to teaching, Wendy works tirelessly in nature preserves, cutting brush, helping with controlled burns, spreading prairie seeds, and sharing her knowledge with volunteers. Wendy has inspired countless people like me through her example and hands-on hard work. Please join me in welcoming Wendy Paulsen.
Thanks, Joe, for that generous introduction, and thanks Openlands for the opportunity to pay tribute to an individual who had an outsized impact on so many here today. I've been asked to speak about volunteerism, especially as it relates to conservation. Talk about speaking to the choir. This room is filled with volunteers who commit their time, energy, resources to all dimensions of conservation: education, advocacy, land protection, monitoring, outreach. But I suspect that there are others here who are not so familiar with the depth and breadth of conservation volunteerism in the Chicago region. For you, I hope to offer a crash course in the subject, both verbally and visually. It's something I've spoken about for some years, ever since my husband and I took a 15-year detour to New York City and Washington, D.C. I had not realized until then how utterly special the conservation community in the Chicago region is, especially as it relates to volunteers. The opportunity to participate, learn, and make a difference in natural area restoration was pioneered in Chicago. It kept me coming back for volunteer work days every summer and fall during those years, and was the primary reason that we ultimately returned to this area. I marvel at the vision Steve Packard had back in the 70s when he started the Volunteer Stewardship Network. He understood crowdsourcing before the term came into use. Identify a problem, broadcast the need for solutions, welcome the responses, and give free rein to the energy and commitment and leadership that eventually emerge. For him, the problem was the accelerating degradation of quality in the natural landscapes in the Chicago region, especially in Cook County. Here was a teeming metropolis with 11% of the land protected, the largest system of forest preserves in the country. But at that time, the forest preserves of Cook County had neither the leadership nor the capacity to steward the network of preserves it had established. The prairies and woodlands were becoming choked with buckthorn and other invasive species. But Steve saw an opportunity too. He considered the thousands of urban and suburban dwellers who yearn for activity in nature and want to make a difference, and saw a vast human resources reservoir that could help with restoration and stewardship of neglected landscapes. I would wager that most of those in this room who currently volunteer in natural area restoration are members of Steve's extensive stewardship offspring. I count myself among them. If this lunch had not been scheduled on a Thursday, I would have been at a work day with Citizens for Conservation in Northwest Cook County. Along with a bunch of others here, but I understand the seed cleaning has gone so well this week that we were actually almost done. So, I had no idea what volunteer stewardship meant when I first heard the term. I wondered how my limited understanding of grassland ecology and meager efforts could possibly offer anything of value. But over the years, I've experienced firsthand what happens when individual skills and efforts are multiplied tenfold, 100-fold, and more. It has been deeply heartening to see landscapes transformed, monitoring programs activated, educational outreach begun, public relations efforts initiated, all by volunteers who care deeply about nature and people and how to bring them together. In a world beset by grim news, it is wonderfully hopeful work. What keeps people like me, like many in this room, coming back to volunteer year after year, decade after decade? There's no one answer. Largely, it's the opportunity to make a constructive difference, to participate in a vision and movement that aims for healthy nature and ecologically informed citizens. It's also the opportunity to learn about the precious natural heritage we've inherited. Participating in volunteer stewardship is akin to attending an outdoor conservation university. Some of us are working experientially on basic degrees. Some have masters, and others have earned the equivalent of PhDs in subjects as varied as herpetology, sedge identification, rare plant propagation, species monitoring. For many, there's the satisfaction of physical labor and accomplishment, of the camaraderie of working with others toward a shared goal, of solving difficult problems. The spirit, the ethos that emerges in effective volunteer stewardship groups is so special. The striving for excellence, the constant search for better methods, the grace to welcome every sort of contribution, no matter how modest, the encouragement to those able and willing to take leadership roles, the enthusiasm, the dogged commitment to achieving a vision, the mutual respect and appreciation of all participants. These are the components of the many successful volunteer groups in the Chicago region. Each one has its own style, its own signature. I also think each one has overcome some of the common misperceptions about volunteers, misperceptions which often doom efforts to establish new groups or which hinder the optimal deployment of all that volunteers have to offer. Let me mention three. First, it's often said that volunteerism is primarily for retired, financially comfortable people with time on their hands. But the fact is that the desire to help, to make a contribution, knows no boundaries of age, demographics, occupation. Take, for instance, Openlands Birds in My Neighborhood program, which Jerry and Joe both mentioned, overseen by one full-time staff member, but otherwise operated entirely by volunteers. They now number more than 100. I think I heard the term 200, or the number 200, and include a retired CPS nurse, CEO of a financial services firm, young organic gardener, architect, professor of African American literature, millennials and Gen Xers, who are motivated to spend at least 3 half-days each spring connecting Chicago public school children with birds in their neighborhoods and public parks and forest preserves. The Honeycomb Project is another great example. The only nonprofit in Chicago focused solely on family volunteering, it was started by 2 working moms who wanted to instill an ethic of giving in their children and to spend quality time with them. Honeycomb now involves over 5,000 youth and families from 80% of Chicago area zip codes. They currently feature over 200 projects with 6 to 8 events every weekend year-round. The activities address a spectrum of regional challenges and include ones with an environmental and conservation focus, such as cleanups at Rainbow Beach, working with the Chicago Park District and the Nature Conservancy to plant pollinator species at Palmisano Park in Bridgeport, and with stewardship volunteer Jonathan Sladek at Indian Road Woods in Caldwell. The founders tell me that kids push their parents to participate. They like working together in service to nature and to others. The takeaway from these 2 examples is that people everywhere love and care about their communities. They want to improve them. They want to make a contribution. The challenge is to provide meaningful opportunities to do so and the infrastructure to facilitate and accommodate a wide range of interests and skills. A second misperception is that volunteers need to be managed and told what to do. The fact is that volunteers often have reservoirs of skills and talents to offer and only need the encouragement and empowerment to use them in service to a shared mission. It's true that many people who volunteer want and need training, sometimes from scratch. But it's also true that many come already highly skilled or develop deep specific skills in the course of volunteering. Take, for example, Master Stewards John and Jane Balaban, high school teacher and pharmacist, who have volunteered for years with the North Branch Prairie Project and are widely recognized as regional experts on grass and sedge identification, as well as dragonfly identification, even though technically they are amateurs. In the course of volunteering, the Balabans recognized a need for better ID skills and ran with it, teaching classes to other volunteers, creating a field guide to local dragonflies with the Field Museum, and making thousands of contributions to the online bug guide. Or consider the example of Rob Sulsky. Now retired from the EPA, Rob for decades has volunteered as site steward and has become a master grower of rare plants. When professional nurseries could not propagate a number of challenging species, such as Commandra, prairie phlox, hoary puccoon, Rob paid close attention to the plants and figured out a solution for each species. He transformed his Glenview yard into a rare plant factory that each year produces 7,000 to 10,000 plants that are then planted back into preserves or used to start native seed gardens in other people's yards. An out-of-state artist who was inspired by the restoration community in the Chicago region and the remarkable results has now painted over 70 pieces depicting those landscapes and the forces that shaped them. For the past several years, Philip Juris from Athens, Georgia, traveled Illinois from east to west and south to north with easel and paintbrushes. Next May, the Chicago Botanic Garden will open an exhibition of Philip's paintings picturing the prairie. In each of these cases, the individuals needed only the encouragement to apply their talents and to share them liberally. They have contributed far beyond what a volunteer profile might have specified. The lesson here is that volunteers don't need so much to be managed as to be enabled and facilitated and empowered. The third misperception is that you can only ask volunteers to do so much. Otherwise, you'll burn them out. When volunteers understand the vision and the need, whether it's collecting seed, helping to lead a field walk, eliminate invasive plants, propagate prairie grasses, and have the interest and skills to apply to it, many go well beyond a specific assignment. When a volunteer is enlisted as a genuine partner and feels the trust and support of the paid staff, that volunteer's potential is unleashed. When Bill Kleiman was hired by the Nature Conservancy to manage its Nechusa grasslands, he probably wondered how ever in the world he could restore hundreds of acres to ecological health. But Bill, like Stephen Packard, understood he needed volunteers to help. He welcomed them as full partners. Volunteers have strategized with Bill, done the seed harvesting and burning essential to the restoration, helped negotiate land purchases, built the Taj Mahal of seed storage and processing centers, raised funds for equipment, built fences for the bison that have been reintroduced there. Individuals supervise large units of the grasslands and take full responsibility for the work entailed. In the process, a community has developed at Nechusa that is quite extraordinary, as stunning as the restoration results. Bill has never had to ask the volunteers to do more. He has not worn them out. In fact, their eagerness and capacity to do so much more than anyone ever imagined only grows each year. At Citizens for Conservation workdays in Barrington, volunteers regularly stay beyond the customary 11 a.m. finish time to cut a few more buckthorns, collect more seed, pull some more garlic mustard, or plant more seed plugs. Many of them contribute hours of effort outside of workdays, even when it means pulling white sweet clover in 90-degree heat. They understand the vision, the strategy, and they want to do more to achieve it. I like to remind myself that the root of the word volunteer comes from the Latin volo, volere, which means to want to. Dedicated volunteers are dedicated because they want to pitch in. They understand and buy into a mission or goal and want to be part of a larger effort. It may mean something very specific, like bringing snacks at the end of a work session, or building more seed drying racks, or organizing photos, or publishing newsletters, or arranging interviews with media. Every contribution, small or large, adds up and enriches and expands the scope of achievement. The takeaway here, when fully invested in the work and empowered to contribute, volunteers want to do more, not less. Their greatest reward is in personal growth, learning, working with others, getting to see and experience the results of their hard work, often years in the making. Participation becomes a privilege. For me, frankly, it comes down to love. Love for beauty, love for endlessly fascinating nature, love for learning, love for wild creatures and plants that need homes. At the same time, it comes down to love for one another, the acknowledgement of the capacity in each one of us to care about and care for the precious natural heritage we all have in common. As we work together, learn from and teach one another, the result is not only nature that is healed, it's people too. We find our eyes opened, a sense of purpose, new avenues of inquiry, a deepening appreciation of each other's talents and contributions. But there's even more than the deep personal benefits to volunteers and the ecological benefits to the landscape. The volunteer restoration movement represents a powerful response to a defining challenge of our time. Healthy nature is the original carbon capture technology. Nowhere else I know can claim more protected nature surrounded by such a vast restoration workforce, one that is not dependent on unreliable funding, but instead is fueled by curiosity and commitment to stitch back the tattered ecosystems of a region, to demonstrate to ourselves and others what it means to live a nature-rich life as increasingly urban dwellers, to nurture the resilience that nature needs amid a changing climate. This is the legacy of Stephen's work, along with that of Dwight Perkins, Jens Jensen, and other giants of Chicago conservation. So thank you, Stephen, for sparking a movement that has grown over 4 decades and grows more relevant every year. It gives all of us hope that the good work done by forest preserves, contractors, conservation nonprofits will endure as community-based stewardship groups attend to the details and monitor the quality of natural areas. The model that you put in motion, in which the forest preserves have integrated into their preserve management, is one that has inspired similar initiatives around the country and even the world. Thank you for developing an experiential university that provides lifelong learning and an ecosystem of people where everyone can find a niche and be intimately, constructively involved with nature. And thanks to all of you already deeply involved, and to those who may become involved in protecting, restoring, interpreting, and celebrating the rich Midwestern nature that we all share. Nature conservation needs all the participants it can get, and there's guaranteed job security. Thank you finally to Openlands for hosting this remarkable annual gathering that brings together public officials, conservation practitioners from public agencies, nonprofits, and academic institutions, donors, friends. Thank you for the remarkable work that Openlands continues to do in our region, from school gardens to tree keepers, to natural urban infrastructure, to hiking, biking, and kayak trails, to leading the charge to establish the Hackmatack National Wildlife Refuge in northern Illinois and southern Wisconsin, and lots more, so that people and nature can thrive in an urbanized region. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. That was very inspirational and very, very motivating. So really appreciate it. Let's give Wendy another round of applause, please. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Raman Nogueira. Not only am I a proud member of the Openlands Board of Directors, but I'm also Director of External Affairs for ComEd. And for approximately 10 years, Openlands and ComEd has partnered to administer the ComEd's Green Regions program. Recognizing that open space in our communities is critical and essential element for the quality of our lives, the ComEd Green Regions program awards grants to public agencies in support of their efforts to plan for, protect, and improve open space in Northern Illinois. Since 2013, the ComEd Green Regions program has awarded more than $1.1 million to communities across our service territory for 136 projects that have improved our communities. We look forward to continuing to partner with Openlands and continue to make these improvements in our communities. So before I close the program today, I just wanted to reflect on what we heard today and the things that inspired me and that impacted me. So as Wendy and Stephen have shown us, that it really takes all of us, whether individually or collectively, to make a significant difference: volunteerism. And in the three key areas that are important to all of us, number one is the protection of our open land. Number two is supporting healthy habitat for our wildlife. And three, creating opportunities for our residents in our community so that they can explore and find new ways to connect with nature. Those are the key elements of what we're about. So I just wanted to provide a special acknowledgement and a thank you to Nora Hennessy, our Openlands Vice President of External Affairs. Where are you, Nora? Please stand up. There you are. Yes, thank you to Nora and her team that worked in organizing and putting this magnificent luncheon together. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. A well-deserved round of applause. Finally, I also want to acknowledge and thank the organization A New Leaf for the donation of the beautiful centerpieces that you see at your tables. Yes, thank you very much. Every year, New Leaf has shown their support for Openlands by donating those beautiful centerpieces. And one of the fun things that I get to do for this agenda is give things away. Okay, so one of you is going to be lucky enough to walk away with that centerpiece. And here is how we're going to make it work. It's going to be pretty easy. The person whose birthday is closest to April 1st, okay, is the person who's going to be taking that centerpiece. So, ground rules, okay? Work it amongst your tables and keep it civilized. Okay, all right. Okay, I guess I should have done that as the very, very last thing. Okay. Okay, so before we end, so I like the passion for that centerpiece, so I'm glad to hear that. What I would like to remind you is on your way out, staff members from Openlands will be there to collect your name tags. Please make sure that you provide them the name tags, let's recycle them. I want to thank you for your sponsorship, thank you for your attendance, thank you for joining us today. Be safe on your travels, your commute to your next destination, and I just want to thank you and have a wonderful afternoon. This concludes the program.